And so what I actually wanted to do was sort of pause that moment in time, that split second in time, and the mussel drops and a flower is selected. And I want to actually drill down and take a look at that process under the microscope, because there's actually a lot going on in that very split second, in that there's a lot of information that practitioners can draw upon. And this whole lecture is about the 10, and literally there are 10 different pieces of information that are available and at your fingertips that very moment that sort of the indicator mussel drops and a flower remedy is selected. And the technique I'm talking about is based upon a knowledge of the plants you're using, and the ability to read that plant without looking at a book. Which is probably going to be a bit of an eye-opener for most people, because kinesiology is very book-centric. There's muscle testing, they use books and charts and things like that to refer to for information. But this lecture is actually getting back to the original practice of flower therapy and practicing without the use of muscle testing to find out more and more information, because once you've actually ascertained what remedy somebody needs, the plant itself begins directing, and nature begins directing the balance from that point onwards. And it's kind of like you're basically connecting with nature, and nature's having a conversation back, and you need to stay open for long enough to actually draw in all the information that is on offered, because, as I said, there's 10 different pieces of information you can use to sort of treat your client. And literally, you know everything from what the issue is, how it was even caused, what's going on consciously to actually keep it in the system, and everything right through to even aftercare, what sort of homework to give your clients. That's all actually written into the plants. And if you actually understand how to read the plants using the doctrine of signatures, which is basically a 400-year-old philosophy that's sort of gotten lost over time. If you actually use the traditional methods in flower remedy and plant medicine, you can actually ascertain 10 different vital pieces of information, and it's basically a game changer. It completely changes the practice of flower therapy. If you're reading from books and charts and things like that, it's very quick information, and you can draw a lot from it. But the limitation there is that there's so much that's not printed in those books. There's so much information that, even the author didn't understand or didn't know. So you're reliant on somebody else's insights. Whereas this technique is going back and looking at flower therapy through fresh eyes and having a direct connection to the plants you're actually working with. Because getting back to the example of these plants here that I'm potting up, genus Dicea, there's quite a number of Dicea species. In the Skyflowers range, there's actually 4 of these, 4 different remedies made from 4 different species. Now, as we can see, it's quite a prickly looking plant and things like that. And if you had a bottle of this, in your clinic, and you were, just the casual user of flower remedies, you would think, just to take this remedy, like normally, and like any other flower remedies, like a bark flower with the oak, or larch or something like that. Whereas genus Dicea, this particular plant group, they're cathartic. Their archetypal nature, their basic primal design is that they are cathartic, which means they'll induce a kind of like emotional vomiting, so to speak, to spit out anything in the system that's discordant or traumatic, or things that have been locked up in your system for a long time. Now, basically they're flowers for healing crisis. Now, the thing about that is that, if somebody's in a healing crisis, these are the flowers you go to. They're kind of like the last line of defence, so to speak. They're kind of like the fail-safe. If someone's going into a meltdown on the table, these are the ones you reach for. Just to basically get them through the crisis and sort of stabilise them. Whereas if somebody's not in a healing crisis and they use this type of flower, well, there's a potential that you could actually induce a catharsis. because they are cathartic in nature. And there's an unfortunate myth that goes around in flower therapy that that flower remedies are completely safe. And I'd actually debate that, and I do in my paper. There's a section on the inherent risks of any therapy, not just flower therapy. But flower therapy does have risks associated with it. I've identified about 10 different risks. 3 of those are to do with alcohol. People with alcohol intolerances and things like that and can't take alcohol. But there's actually risks to do with vibrational medicine and actually taking on the vibrational pattern of plants. That's a thing that, it's a skill. It's a skill to be able to do that and to do it safely and to do it effectively. Whereas, unfortunately, there's a myth out there, and it's one of the reasons why I put it in my paper, by the way, is that flower therapy is completely safe and they won't do anything to you if you don't need the remedy. I can't buy into that kind of school of thought, because the other school of thought is flower remedies are potent. So there's this sort of clash of ideas, and it's a bit confusing. On the one hand, it's completely safe. On the other hand, it's a very potent and powerful therapy. How can you have both? It's kind of like saying to somebody, if you use a chainsaw on a tree, you're using a very powerful and a very potent tool, and it's completely safe. Well, it's kind of like you could chop your arm off if you don't know what you're doing, like with a chainsaw, because one of the dangers of chainsaw is actually kickback, the chain locking onto the wood and then jolting back just from the force of the actual spinning of the blade. And plenty of people have been sent to hospital doing that because they don't know how to use a chainsaw. But flower therapy is the same. There are risks associated with it, and that's not to ring alarm bells for people. That's not to sort of scare people out of using flower remedies. It's just basically a way of saying factor these things into your technique, simply because if you operate from the assumption that something is completely safe, you won't do the due diligence or the necessary safety checks just to make sure that your client is fine and they'll be fine when they leave your clinic. Certainly if you're sending a client away from your clinic using a cathartic like this, they should be monitored, most definitely they should be monitored. Perhaps daily phone calls or email contact if you're putting them on something strong and heavy like this. Generally you won't, because usually these the dike is sort of tested up for use in clinic when there's an actual crisis inside the clinic that needs to be sort of patched up. Generally these don't come up for out of clinic sort of work. But yeah, that's basically it. I just thought I'd air a few thoughts about my lecture and sort of run over a few things just because I am sort of in and out all day, sort of doing a bit of gardening and then going back to my slideshow to sort of change a few of the graphics and work on my notes a bit. And I just thought I'd air a few thoughts live and just for my own sort of sake, and I thought I'd put a video up on YouTube just for the people who are following my work and want to know where I'm up to in sort of stages of development. I might post another video in a day or two, because there's a couple of other things I want to talk about as well, just to do with product and all that kind of thing, but all of that stuff's inside, and seeing as it's a lovely day, I thought I'd stay out here and do a bit of potting, just while I sort of go over a few things in my own head and work out, sort of the next stage of development for the Skyflowers, sort of, to do with this conference and what I'll be doing after the conference. So that's it from me, Brendan Rowan. If you haven't subscribed, you know the drill. Click down below, all that kind of thing. Click the little bell icon, apparently, just so you get alerts that new videos have been posted. For those coming along to the conference, make sure you drop by the Skyflowers stand. I'll just water these in. Drop by the Skyflowers stand and say hello and have a chat, and if you've got any questions, I'm there all weekend and basically putting myself at your disposal. So if you want to come and pick my brains on some stuff, or need a hand sort of developing a toolkit of your own, a flower remedy toolkit, come along, I'll give you some advice. Not necessarily on the Skyflowers. I'm not into that. I'm not into just putting people onto my product. I'll match you up with the flowers that you're attuned to, the flowers that you pretty much should be working with, and you know, pretty much the plants that you know and love in the garden is what should be in your toolkit. I love these plants, that's why I work with them. This is pretty useless because there's a lot of leaves in the actual watering can, I've just noticed. So that's it from me. Over and out.